Welcome to MOTs, where we'll be applying the Manzer or Mosi Thurlow scale of quantitative analysis of pop culture narrative through a binary system.
Or MOTs. This podcast contains spoilers, mature content, and language. Viewer discretion advised.
Hello, and welcome back to MOTs. I, of course, am Scott Thurlow, a Nocturnal Animal, here with Janie Manzer.
Hello.
And Stephen Amosi.
Good evening.
And we have just seen Nocturnal Animals, and we're going to discuss it and review it in the famous MOT system. So, does anyone have a funny logline? I believe you do.
I do. This is a film where you watch a boring, middle-aged housewife read a much more interesting novel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I will agree with that. And now we'll go to Steve-O with the synopsis.
So, this is a movie about an art dealer who got divorced, and now her ex has written a book. And it's a thriller about him, his wife and kid getting murdered, and then that's pretty much it.
And then the movie ends. We'll discuss that later. But yeah, so now we'll go to E for the intro to it.
Well, should we discuss the very first scene of this movie?
I certainly was going to. If you guys weren't, we'll go ahead.
So,
the cold open, if you will, as I call it.
Yeah.
Large, older women, and by large I mean relatively plump, are dancing full frontal naked for about, 5 minutes or so?
It's 2 to 3 minutes.
Seems like
it's
forever.
lengthy. It does seem longer. But they're also... go ahead.
And the rolls that are bouncing around
Yes.
everywhere.
Bounce wiggle, if you will. But they're also wearing like waving like cheerleader like batons around and stuff. Still all naked and stuff, but sometimes wearing a hat.
They cut to like cold stares of them, or kind of like close-ups on their face.
Yeah.
And then superimpose those over the like just bland bodies as they're.
It's some Lynchian shit for
gyrating.
sure. Yes.
And it turns out this is an art project.
Of course, it's
the
an avant-garde art piece.
Main character Laura is kind of curating at this gallery.
No, the main character, Laura?
Susan.
Susan. The main character, Susan, is curating at this gallery.
Mm.
And you would kind of follow her life as she has a husband who she's not connecting with, who turns out to be cheating on her. He travels a lot doing some kind of vague business.
I thought he was selling her art or some of it or something like that.
Who the hell knows? They don't really explain it.
It doesn't really matter, you're right. She's a traveling salesman of some sort.
Snake oil salesman.
And then, so she gets the manuscript to her ex-husband, who she hasn't seen for 19 years, called Nocturnal Animals. And it kind of starts forcing her to reminisce. And you get to see like other parts of her life, which are involving like friends of hers and the community. And it's kind of Bret Easton Ellis style.
At least those scenes.
Yeah, I don't know how much more there is to...
There's not much. Oh, we're saying that the intro ends when she gets the manuscript?
When Jake Gyllenhaal appears as
the fictional character.
When she starts reading the manuscript.
Yes. I'll agree with that, yes.
Yeah, Jake Gyllenhaal is the person that she's imagining as the main character in the book that he sent her. Yeah. It's like a facade of Bret Easton Ellis. Like
I like that. It's like, Bret Easton Ellis wallpaper.
It's like it felt like it wanted to make some sort of remark on the art scene, which I guess it did to some degree, but certainly not in a American Psycho way.
Right.
But more in a Glamorama way, if you ever
yes. That is pretty funny, yeah.
Basically Zoolander,
yeah,
but the novel version of that. So it does have that. It does have elements of the absurdity of the art world and how, like, for instance, one of the characters is a woman who's very much into the kind of not occult, but what's the
new agey kind of stuff.
Yeah, the new age, the scene, and her husband is a gay man that she knows is, but they're happy together. So it kind of dealing with that kind of strange aspects of the elite art circles.
Yeah, and they sort of even lampshaded to a bit to what you guys just said. There's a line when she's Susan, the main character, Amy Adams, played by Amy Adams, is in like one of their weird, like sort of standard Hollywood house parties. I assume they're in Hollywood. They think they're in LA, I believe they said. And the gay husband you just mentioned just says to her, "Oh, just revel in the absurdity of our world. You know, like this is what we do."
Yeah.
So it was a quick lampshade, and yeah, you're right. It sets all up like. And to your point, Steve-O, yeah, maybe it's trying to make some kind of point. I don't know what it was, other than basically use it as a framework setting. But I do agree that the intro begins when she starts reading the manuscript, and it cuts to like her envisioning what's happening and sort of like the road trip that this character from the book is taking. And I thought it was pretty good. Like I kind of like that setup. You're introduced to the world and the characters. You get enough backstory, exposition, if you will, as to who her husband is and like how long it's been, etc. And hey, here's my manuscript, check it out. And as she starts to sort of, not live it, but vividly experience it.
The strange part about this film is I didn't know what to expect going in. I thought it would be more of a kind of serious thriller, and it has a very, very arresting opening.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
Where I didn't know where it was going to go from there, and perhaps it's a slight failure on the movie later to come, but I was intrigued by the opening. It at least kept my attention through the first part. So I'm going to give it wasn't the greatest piece of cinema introduction I've seen in a while, but I'll have to give it a soft one.
I think it was a solid one for me. Yeah, I like you said, I was intrigued and I was interested to see where it was going to go.
So I've been thinking about this one, and I don't know if I'm going to give it a 1. It's just because I think I'm probably attributing things that I find out later in the movie to how I feel about the intro like later on. Yeah. I think when I saw it, I enjoyed it well enough. But this story about Amy Adams' character, Susan, is very boring to me compared to the, there's this book that she's reading, the Nocturnal Animals, is meant to be a lot more arresting and interesting than her story. And looking back on it, that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Does that mean that it's good for being boring compared to the rest of it? I mean,
all right. Well, think of it this way.
When I saw it, I was like, okay, let's see where this goes. I was definitely willing to give it more time. But thinking back on it, that time to me was kind of, like, I wish they had just done the book.
Yes, the story of
the novel. Cut out the extra crap. I think that would have been a lot better.
I mean, maybe, but I know what you're saying. It's tough because you're sort of retroactively viewing it.
Yeah.
But at the time, that's how I'm trying judging it. That I was invested, and especially when the novel of the story, like the story of the novel starts, that is like the most arresting part of the movie for sure. And I still think it's solid enough. So,
well, we're not including like the beginning of the novel,
right? I understand that, but
cuts off right before that. I don't know. I guess I'll give it a very soft one.
All right.
Because at the time I was interested to see where it went.
Well, now you can talk about spoiler, the most interesting part of the movie, Steve-O, with the body.
Yeah. So it gets into she's throughout the body and most of the rest of the movie. We're going back and forth between seeing Susan in her daily life, I guess. And then, as she's reading the book, we're seeing what's happening in the book along with her. The main character, the characters in the book, it's Jake Gyllenhaal's character,
Tony, I think is
Tony. His name is Tony in the book. In like real life, his name is Edward. But Tony is going on a road trip with his family, and they are
with his wife and daughter.
Right, and at some point they're run off the road by these 3 hooligans
in West Texas. Let's be clear about that. Yes.
And there's actually a really tense scene.
Yes. That
basically what it comes down to is his wife and daughter are taken by two of the guys
by said hooligans,
and the other one forces Tony to drive out into the desert, and he gets left there. Now, you come to find out that his wife and daughter, like he walks through the desert all night. His wife and daughter are raped and murdered, and he is basically dead set on finding the guys that did this to them and getting revenge. In between this, there's also flashbacks of Amy Adams' previous life with Edward, who's also played by Jake Gyllenhaal. And that is kind of just about
Their relationship.
Yes. You find out that he basically has written this book to her, and whatever.
Okay.
That part I'm also not really that interested in. Her life, their relationship, whatever.
But it is in the film.
So back to the important part. Jake Gyllenhaal is basically going out for revenge. He enlists the aid, or he gets given a cop who's a detective that comes, basically starts tracking down these three guys. They come to find out that one of them was killed in a robbery. The other one was taken back to the police station, and the third one is out there. Eventually, they get the cop brings all three of them together, or the two surviving members together, and they basically are killed. I don't know. I'm going on and on about this. It comes down to the fact that it's a revenge story. Jake Gyllenhaal is going through all this to get revenge. His character, Tony, is going through all this to get revenge on these three guys. One of them ends up getting shot by his cop friend, played by Michael Shannon, and the other one ends up basically being, they end up together in a room, Gyllenhaal and the other guy, and he kills the guy. And then he ends up falling on his gun and killing himself.
What? No, that's not what happened?
Yeah. He shoots himself in his stomach accidentally.
I thought he got bashed in the face by the villain guy.
He did get bashed in the face. He stumbles out.
I thought he was bleeding out essentially, but
he's
okay.
Blind.
It doesn't really matter.
He's blind, and then he falls on the gun. Gun goes off. He shoots himself, and then he ends up dying.
I actually didn't catch that. All right, either way. Sure.
The only reason I know that is because of reading the synopsis of the novel this was based off of.
I thought he just was dying in the desert, but it doesn't really matter. So yeah, that's the end of his story. And I think so, yeah. I think you guys are right, or we discussed this precast a bit. The depiction of the events in the novel was by far the most interesting part of this film. And yeah, the scene at the beginning is super tense. It's kind of it's almost as if it wanted to be a sort of a horror movie kind of thing, but it's super realistic, so it's very unnerving.
What's funny about this is that whole plot of Nocturnal Animals, the novel, is not part of the narrative of the main story.
Right.
It's a reflection of Amy Adams' story, which is far less interesting. And I think you mentioned this earlier, Steve-O. Part of the point is to show the banality. Your trivial problems in your life are nowhere near what the fictionalized accounts could very well be.
Sure.
And your projection and how the two relate to each other and what you find in fiction. What's funny is I'm more interested in watching her escapism.
They should have made a movie out of just the events of the novel, if you will.
Because I don't need Amy Adams to remind me how boring my life is.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I mean, you're right. It's a funny point, and we'll probably speak more about it later. But I think because the depiction of of Nocturnal Animals, in quotes, if you will, was contained in the body, that was by far the most interesting part. So whenever she started reading the novel again and would flash those events, I was super interested and invested in it.
Right.
While yes, at the same time, when it would go back to her boring life, it would be somewhat boring because that's just how it is.
And so, what I really want to say about this is, that the part that was the novel was very tense. I feel like it was. I feel like I don't know if I would want to read that book. I thought it was way better for
being
the actors that were in it and the cinematography than the story actually was.
I kind of agree with that, and we'll speak to that in style and so forth. But I think you're right about that.
It's the use the wife and kid as a reason to have a revenge novel.
Yes,
that's what it is. And Michael Shannon, Jake Gyllenhaal, all three of the criminals,
the Deliverance psychos,
do a very good job acting, and the scenes that they're all in are very tense. And Michael Shannon is great with A, being tense, and then B, bringing comedic relief into it. Thinking just about the plot, I'm really not impressed by it, but it is well done.
You're right. It's weird because I sort of agree with that. It's compelling because of that, even if it's not like narratively compelling, it's really weird. What do you think, E?
So again, I don't actually consider anything that happened in Nocturnal Animals, the novel, to be
Part of the plot.
part
Yeah,
of
I
the
get
plot.
it, but
And what's fascinating about that is that the Amy Adams side almost goes David Lynchian
yes,
with
not
becoming
almost. I think it does.
No,
Well,
it flirts
I
with David Lynch and
all right.
then turns and because she starts losing sleep or she's always had like insomnia, and her kind of it's kind of suggesting that her reality
It's supposed to be
is
like bleeding over.
into
Yeah.
Mhm.
like this fictional world, but it's not really.
No.
And there's a random jump scare, which I have to mention,
Yes.
that makes it's like, oh, are you bored with this movie? Ha, we got you.
Yeah.
Now pay attention for the rest of it. Like someone, like you're falling asleep while someone's reading a story, and then they just slap you.
Yeah. It's exactly like that. That's true. Like it was, but I thought it was sort of like I don't know how to describe it. I like that they had that jump scare in there,
It
even
was
though
ballsy.
yeah, like
I will. You know what? I didn't mind the jump scare. I will say that the main plot probably needed something like that because it was fucking boring to me. I don't give a shit about her life.
But
you
you're
know?
right.
Like, well, I mean, I don't give a shit about her life. I don't really care all that much about her romance with this guy who later wrote a novel that she's enjoying. You know,
I don't know if she's enjoying it, but sure.
well, she writes
All
him
right,
an
let's
email
not
that
argue.
says that she's loving it, but like,
I think she
or
said
she's
it's
enwrapped by it or whatever.
devastating, but it's very moving. I think she said in
Yeah.
the email. Anyway, go ahead.
I feel like this is a movie that has made waves because of everything but the writing of it.
That's harsh, man.
To some degree, I just like the more I think about it. You know, I came out of the theater being like, that was pretty good. And the more I think about it, the more the writing just wasn't that good.
Do you remember the never-ending story?
Yes.
You know how the kid is reading the book. You don't remember the story about what happened to that kid, nor if they did more with him and made him 50% of the movie. No, you want to see
Yes.
the luck
I wanna
dragon
see Fangor and so forth,
and all
yeah.
that. And that's what they offer you, a fantastic story that is, again, not the main plot.
Right.
And I have to punish them for that with a 0.
It's
Yeah,
really
I
harsh.
agree. That's going to be a 0 for
It's
me
a weird
for
one.
sure.
You're right. Like, and I think you guys.
I don't even know if honestly, I don't even know if I cut off where we were supposed to cut off because I kind of just went into into Nocturnal Animals, the book in the movie. Where do we think that the end? I think it's right. Honestly, I think I probably did because I think it's right. It's after she's done reading the book.
Yes, exactly. That's what I
When
was going to say.
he says he'll meet her anywhere, anytime. It's like the
Yes,
last
that's-
5 minutes
that's
of the
yes,
movie.
yes, agreed. It's weird. Like you, I agree a lot with what you guys are saying, and you're right because of the sort of, I guess how shall I say, incidental inclusion of that, like as a story, if you will. And the one thing you brought up, E, that I would have liked it a lot if indeed the let's call it the actual main narrative was about her sort of being driven like mad by it or like bleeding over and so forth. Like it would have made more sense to have that jump scare. It was funny kind of that it was there, but it went nowhere. Like that wasn't actually happening. She wasn't like starting to see things in like her present life that the book was somehow like affecting her by. And yeah, the story of quote Nocturnal Animals was awesome, but it didn't really mean anything. So it's really weird. But because that's in the body, I might give it a 1 just based on that.
No. By our scale, it is an assessment of the effectiveness of the narration.
Yeah, it's true.
I posit that.
But if I like the
anything
story within
that-
the story, then
But that is not the story. The story
know, you're
is
right, like-
Amy Adams.
I understand. That's why it's hard for me to figure it out. But I think I may have to agree with you and adhere to that scale, and therefore maybe give it a softish 0. But since the Nocturnal Animals plot was not actually part of Nocturnal Animals, if you will, then I think I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Is that what you're doing, Steve?
Yep. 0.
All right. Well, that'll bring me to conclusion with about the last 7 minutes, I guess, of the film. I think here's where things go quite wrong. This is definitely the weakest part. Yeah, so she finished reading the novel, and I think she had, like you said, you just mentioned that Amy Adams had emailed Jake Gyllenhaal earlier saying she was enjoying, like, the novel was affecting her, and if you'd like to meet up, blah, blah, blah. And he says, yeah, anytime, anywhere, and I guess gives her a restaurant, and she gets all dolled up, if you will. And then she, like, starts getting a little bit undolled up. Like, she starts taking her lipstick off, I believe. Like, she's getting dressed and she's all lipsticked up, which she normally is for her daily life, being an art dealer and person. So like I just noticed that little moment, and then she goes to the very fancy, looks like high-end restaurant, and goes to wait for him, and of course he never shows up, and then credits. So it's kind of a very anticlimactic thing. Like, it's really weird. What do you guys have to say about it?
I actually, when this scene started, about a minute
I pretty much
into
guessed it, right? We both
I
did.
knew that this was the last scene in the film because there's nowhere else to go with it. Once it becomes obvious he's not showing up, to me, it's actually fitting narrative closure for a weak story to begin with.
But you knew that
it's a fitting
it had to have that
conclusion
ending, you're
to
saying?
yeah. So that's...
As soon as she looked at the door, you kind of knew that he wasn't going to come. But like,
yeah, true.
I don't know. It seems like I've been saying this pretty much since we got out of the theater, but it seems like a really dumb and just poor, petty ending to this. And it felt like a statement from not only from Edward, who is her ex, but from like the screenwriter himself to some degree.
Tom Ford himself.
Yeah, like I don't know. It just felt like it was like gotcha. Like what? Who gives a shit if he showed up or not? Like I don't know.
All right, I again agree kind of largely with both of you to some weird extent. It was narrative closure was achieved there. But you're right, Steve-O, for what, to what end and why? Who cares? But here's a question I'm going to pose to you guys. What do you think would have been a better ending? What would you have liked to have seen? What did you think, before it became obvious that he wasn't going to show up, then what would you think was going to be like some kind of confrontation with them?
I don't know. I don't want to have written the ending to this movie.
Well, write a better one is what I'm saying. Or like, I don't know.
I think it was a very fitting ending. And knowing the book's ending, not to be a...
but to be a snob.
But like I feel that the movie had a better or at least from the synopsis that I read had a better ending to it. I like the ending for what it was worth. I mean, it's not the greatest thing, but it's not the greatest plot.
I don't know if I don't think it's fitting. And here's why. There's nothing to suggest that the character Edward in this movie would act like that, would do that. Granted, it's through her perception of
her flashbacks,
of remembering him in the past, but he doesn't seem like the type of character that would do that. Would dedicate a book to you just to be petty. Would get you to like something that he did, and then make you come out to dinner and then not show up.
Well, I just thought of this actually, so let me propose this. You keep using the word petty, and like it seems like it's that on the surface, but if you think that his character. Edward was hurt so much by the way that Amy Adams left their marriage, then maybe it has taken him 20 years to write this novel and work through it, and he was hurt that much, and that's the best he can do against her.
That doesn't make it not petty.
I mean, maybe not. It depends how
I mean, she aborted their child without telling him.
Sure. So
we failed to mention as part of the backstory.
Sure,
to them.
I get it. He has every right to be angry with her. He doesn't have it's not that he doesn't have the right to, but to wait 20 years to have the perfect moment to get her to come crawling back and then not show up. You don't think that's petty?
I mean, yes and no.
What do you mean?
It's all relative. It could be petty to you, but to him, perhaps this was the, it
doesn't matter how he feels about it.
He was dying from a gut shot wound in Texas. So,
right.
Oh wait, that's a different character.
I'll disclose, in my own personal life, there was a time in which I would have been Edward. I almost kind of was. And yeah, you're right.
Okay, and you might have done something petty. That doesn't make it not petty. I think it's a fucking...
Regardless, I don't think
that word is now losing meaning to me, so let's stop using it.
We're not going to convince ourselves about this.
Sure. I'm going to give it a 0.
I don't begrudge you for that 0. I understand where you're coming from with it. I'm going to give it a soft 1 because just on the fact that I don't see any other path they could have taken.
There was no other conclusion. Sure. I think I might agree with E on this one. And I wanted to give this movie credit in the body for the Nocturnal Animals stuff. But since I didn't do that, I'll give it a soft 1 here as well.
Just to be petty. So you're giving them credit for writing him? You're giving him credit for writing himself into a corner?
Kind of, yes, but it's kind of funny. But I think
one that closes out the story.
Yes,
sure,
exactly.
Because if they had gotten back together and it was all lovey-dovey, I think that would have been a worse ending.
Oh, I agree. I don't think they should have. I just don't think that they should have done that.
Sure.
Anyway,
All right, so this might be an interesting one. That'll bring us to themes with E.
I saw two major themes throughout this. One I brought up already, which is the concept of, in a sense, the writer and his audience.
Which is always a fiction.
Yes, thank you. But in a sense, that is true to that.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Edward had what was it? Laura?
Susan.
Sorry, okay.
I don't know why you keep saying Laura. It's weird.
That's the name of the book, Tony and Laura.
Oh.
Anyway, Susan accuses Edward of fictionalizing her in real life,
Right.
let alone he legitimately does it in the work. But also the idea of projecting yourself onto stories, projecting your world upon it, and escapism through. But I think the more interesting theme in this work is kind of identity and gender and sexuality, which is from the opening scene. Very like
Sure.
It's weird because Westworld and now Nocturnal Animals both had copious amounts of nudity, but desexualized it in a way where
it's not sexy anymore, really. Yeah, in a sense.
And so they deal with like what it means to be a man and a woman throughout this entire thing, with Edward feeling that he's a weak man, and the portrayal of the character within the novel is facing that, like, the repercussions of not being able to stand up to more of the alpha male types. And I think it's kind of an ironic death there, that the minute he does achieve that traditional masculinity, he ends up shooting himself in the gut.
Right.
You also have Amy Adams' character, who is a very hard woman, or at least
she's driven, I guess I want to say.
Driven and kind of like suppresses her emotions. That all the tragedies that are happening in her life, she either runs from or suppresses. And like, there's the one set where it looks like she's almost going to cry, but she doesn't. And like, you only get a twitch of the eye there. And the ending, I think, fits very well in it, with like, for all of her attempts to avoid being, in the sense of the stereotypical woman, she ends up getting stood up on a date.
Yeah, true.
And having a husband that cheats on her, and becoming the hard woman that her mother was. So I think that, again, I could probably go into more depth with that, again, portrayal of sexuality and all, but it's kind of a very, I don't know if they had any really specific points, but just addressing the concept overall. So
no, I agree with all that, really. So I'd written down just real quick, like, who you really are / want to be / become, which sort of ties into, you said, like, I believe Susan says, like, I'll never be my mother, but she gets told that she's turning into her mother, like something like that. And you're right about all the gender kind of politics stuff, or the tinges of that traces of it, I guess I'll say, that are contained therein. So yeah, I mean, I thought it was all fine. It's not the deepest movie really in the world, but I thought, like, yes, I agree with you. Those are probably the two main ones. If there are any more, feel free to let me know, but I think those are the obvious ones. And I think it did a pretty solid, okay job of handling them.
Yeah, there's a point where Edward says, you write about yourself. And so we are kind of led to believe that, and it's pretty obvious that the story that he writes is about him kind of, and how he gets over losing his wife and kid. Amy Adams having had an abortion, then he finds out about it, and that's how their marriage dissolved. And there is that parallel there, but I'm not 100% sure. I think you made a good point about the gender stuff and the sexuality themes that are going on in this, and the identity, trying to figure out who you are. And I think that he, is trying to figure out who he is through this book. But, in the end, when he throws off the yoke of being the weak man, he dies from it, basically. When he actually goes and gets his revenge, he shoots himself in the gut.
What you do not understand, to channel Freud, is that in becoming a man, he castrates himself.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess.
Castrates his life.
That's what Freud might say about it. But I mean, like I said, like, I had no really issue with it. I didn't think it was handled poorly. I just think it was, like, sort of there and fine for what it was.
Yeah, I think that the themes were decent. I thought that perhaps the movie took itself more seriously than it turned out, or thought it was being deeper than it
Maybe.
really was.
That might be
maybe.
the case. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if the movie did, but I can definitely see some people coming into this and its art house style and wanting to impose themes on this work that don't exist there, and it's very easy to do because I think the movie encourages you to project onto it, and I don't necessarily, as you said, I don't think it's all that deep, but it does have something to say, and I think what the message is trying to say, it says well.
Yeah,
so.
Sure, I'll agree with that.
Yeah, I'll give it a 1 for that.
All right, that'll be 1 for E. Okay, and that'll bring us to antagonists. With you, Steve-O.
So, the antagonist of this, I guess, is Amy Adams, and also the protagonist. I don't know.
You're right. It is another weird one.
There's no other real protagonist unless you count the 3 guys in the book, but we've already talked about how that's not really the plot.
I think I have an argument, but you go on and I'll make a possible avenue for us to explore.
So, it's, I guess, having a bad marriage is the antagonist.
Damn it, that was sort of close to what I was going to say.
Or not trusting your heart or something. I don't know. I'm kind of, the more I think about this one, the more I'm leaning away from a good score.
Grasping at straws.
Yeah.
How about this? The manuscript of Nocturnal Animals is the antagonist to Amy Adams because she starts feeling haunted and moved by it, and disturbed and perturbed perhaps by it a bit, as she reflects upon her actual history with Edward, her first husband, Arthur.
I have almost nothing to say about this because it's not the book, because she was already kind of...
I know, that was kind of jokey.
Yeah, I know. She's kind of disturbed, even though that's a very harsh term to use. She's
losing
herself. She was doubting.
Yeah.
But she had already lost herself. And I don't, maybe, again, if it goes back to that kind of... it's not even quite a gender politics thing. It's more of like what she wanted for herself, and slowly realizing that life doesn't cater to your wants and desires.
See, that'd be the antagonist that I would bring up, the general thing of disappointment in life, really.
Yeah.
And that's what she's going through. She's going through an existential crisis. And
that's always going to be effective is my argument, but I don't know.
I don't know. I didn't really find that to be all that effective for me. I didn't feel bad for her, or, her character didn't really affect me very much.
Her character seemed entitled, which is the biggest problem I have with sympathizing with her.
They referenced that, sure.
Doubts about... Well, I'm going to dismiss my servants for the weekend so that I can sit at home by myself and bemoan my existence. Again, it's first world problems.
I get it, you're right, sure, but I was going to say, like, living in an existential crisis day to day, like that's, as I do, that's going to be antagonistic, but right, as applied to this narrative, it's sort of like, it wants you to think that, I guess, right? But I don't know if you guys might have convinced me, I don't know if it actually gets there fully for me to give it a 1 on this.
I'm going to give it a 0 for this.
Yeah. Like I said, it's kind of harsh because I think the quote villains in the story itself were well done, but they're probably just secondary characters, which we'll speak about. So anyway, well, that'll bring me to protagonist with Amy Adams' portrayal of Susan. I don't even know if they said her last name. Doesn't really matter. I thought she was okay, but you're right. The entitlement thing just sort of got to me. You're right. Like, that was sort of part of her character. So, like, I don't know if I can fault it, but does that mean I'm going to be sympathetic to these characters' issues and problems? Maybe to a lesser degree than I would have been otherwise, were it not the case for that. I think she did a good job portraying this person. The sort of caricature, kind of, but not really. But like, what'd you say as your log line? Like, the middle-aged woman who does whatever you said.
Boring middle-aged woman,
like unsatisfied with her life in a second now bad marriage. So like, I don't know, it's weird. But was I invested? No, I was more invested of her being like, go ahead and read that novel again because I want to see what happens in that story.
Yeah,
I don't care about your art house life and your hipster friends or whatever. So I don't know. It's really harsh. Like.
I like Amy Adams quite a bit.
Yeah, me too, exactly.
And she played almost the exact same character in Arrival.
Nah,
But
I don't know if I agree with that.
with her portrayal of that kind of withdrawn, although again in Arrival she was a lot more curious.
I think I'm
going
going
to
to blame the script and not her acting.
Yes. But I thought she did a fine job in this with what she was given.
Yeah, exactly. With that caveat. Mhm.
And I didn't hate the character. I particularly wasn't invested in it, but Susan, is that, yeah.
Yes.
Susan did. I followed Susan throughout this movie, and although I was invested, as you invested in the second B plot more, I'll give her a soft 1.
I think I might do the same at the end of the day.
I don't know. I think I might give her a 0. I won't give Amy Adams a 0. I thought she did a good job acting. But like we said, yeah, this character was I'll give her this. She got me to care about the character to a small degree. Perhaps more than I probably should have.
All right.
Considering,
No, I see what you're saying, though. I get it.
like,
yeah.
her problems are, she's got herself into this conundrum. I would say
Art house problems.
she let's just say if you believe the all the past her memories of the past, she kind of sold her soul to go live with this guy that her mom would want her to marry, and she became her mother.
It's tough being a Texas debutante.
Yeah.
Growing up and falling in love with an artist and then leaving him for a wealthy businessman. That's a tough life.
You're right,
Steve-O.
and I can
sounds
relate
really
to
harsh.
that.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like you said, I'll give it a soft 1. I think just on the strength of her, not necessarily like her character, but it was good enough.
I think I'm gonna give it a 0.
right.
I'm gonna give her a 0.
Fair enough, sir. Well, this might be the perhaps one we can talk about at length. Secondary characters with the.
So I'm going to gush over one for a moment, which again isn't part of the plot, but whatever. Well, I'll take the fictional.
But it
characters
is in
here.
the movie.
Michael Shannon.
Yep.
Did a phenomenal job. And I do have a soft spot for grizzled Texas Rangers.
He's playing a character we've seen like in dozens of films, but
in fact, this year with Hell or High Water,
Yeah.
it's, Jeff Bridges played the
Yes.
same character. But I don't know. I'm not yet tired of seeing that character appear on the screen.
fair enough.
Yeah, he did do a really good job, and by the same token, Jake Gyllenhaal did a phenomenal job.
I have something weird to say because I remember when Jake Gyllenhaal really first got his start. Nowadays, when I hear, Jake Gyllenhaal's in a movie, I'm excited to go see that movie.
Me too. I agree.
From Nightcrawler.
Yep.
And his portrayal in this way, he was the best actor, I think, in this work. And his portrayal as the broken husband gave a lot of acting chops in that. So I don't know, like the greatest strength of this movie is for all of the characters is the supporting cast.
I will agree with that to a large extent. So I was going to give a shout out to. I knew you were going to give a shout out to Michael Shannon, who I agree did an excellent job, top notch, as your sort of like standard grizzled Texas detective or ranger, whatever he was, who's helping like the wronged man get justice outside the system. But I think the one I'm going to pick is I don't have the actor's name in front of me. The sort of leader of the redneck the Nocturnal Animals who terrorize Tony's character in the book and end up getting their the brunt of his final vengeance at the end. The lead guy, I think his name was Ray in the film. He was almost like a Joker-like character to me. He was just doing this stuff, because he even said, he's like, it's fun to kill people. That's why I'll do it. So I think he did a pretty good, like, sort of menacing, like, he's not scared. He's not intimidated by the cops or anything, and not until the very end. But he just played this, like, sort of unhinged leader of this little, like, group that apparently they do this is what they do. They mess with people and kidnap them and murder them sometimes and other horrible things. But I think he was Joker-like to me, and I'm always going to like that. So
yeah.
On a scale of Texas Chainsaw Massacre to Deliverance, it's closer to Deliverance, but still has that kind of horrifying, like sociopathic tendency to it.
Exactly.
It worked really well.
And I think exactly. I can't say it any better. So I'm gonna give, on the strength of all that, I'm gonna give secondary a 1.
I completely agree. I'm gonna supporting characters were pretty strong in this.
All right, and that'll be dialogue with you, Steve-O.
So there was some not great dialogue in parts of this movie, but I will say that anytime Gyllenhaal and Michael Shannon were having a conversation,
Yeah.
it was awesome.
Yeah.
And there it was a lot of like gruff, brisk talk from Michael Shannon. He didn't really like to talk about himself very much. In fact, at one point, Tony, Gyllenhaal's character, tries to get him to talk about himself. He says about 5 words and then starts talking about the case again. But I think that is the strength of this movie. Their discussions are the strength of this movie. And the dialogue with the very tense and like really creepy scenes with the 3 guys.
Yes.
With the 3 criminals was pretty good.
Yeah, I'm gonna say it's about 80% quality, maybe a little less, but certainly, yeah, like you said, Zivo, certainly there were some parts that were, if not cringeworthy, I wouldn't say that, just kind of boring, like just blasé about it. But I definitely like the tense scenes of like the criminals when they've, at least certainly when they first meet them, and even within the story when Michael Shannon is talking to Gyllenhaal Tony, and when both of them confront the criminals as well.
Mm.
See, in reality of this work, in Amy Adams' storyline, the dialogue is realistic to the point of being flat and awkward at times.
Agreed.
And based on the strength of the fictionalized world's dialogue, I think that was the intent.
Mm.
And we've discussed this before, whether intention matters. If it's poor dialogue done for a purpose, we should still consider poor dialogue. But I think considering the fact that they, in the same movie, had the parallels there, I think it works. I was initially going to give this a 0, but I think I will give it a 1, with the hope that the screenwriter intended to portray the real world as bland.
Yeah, I mean, if you take that as sort of another layer, then maybe, but I was probably going to give it a 1 anyway, and I still am, but certainly we can, maybe that's a consideration.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 1 as
1,
well.
Steve-O? Mm-hmm. All right. That'll bring me to style, which I think probably is one of, if not the strongest part of Nocturnal Animals, especially, the fictionalized story of Nocturnal Animals when they're in Texas and all of that. But I think all the shots, so something I noticed, I don't know if you guys did, there are numerous close-up shots of like people's eyes and like switching back and forth. Like they're like, the camera is very close to their face, and sometimes they're staring at each other or even when they're talking or having a conversation or just an argument between Edward and Susan, or like you said, when Michael Shannon is talking to Gyllenhaal's fictional character and all that. So I think that was done certainly on purpose. I think there was a point to that, or like it was a motif that they returned throughout, and I thought it was very well done. And yeah, even just, again, like the cinematography, the sweeping shots of some of the Texas stuff, and the art house, like the sort of ridiculous, like absurdity of her little like museum or whatever she's curating, and the art gallery opening, the cold open, as we mentioned. Something was all pretty solid, at least filmatically wise.
I felt the art house started bordering on pretentiously obnoxious at times. And that's saying something.
Maybe that was the
me.
point. Yeah, Jesus, it is saying something.
But again, like what I was saying before, overall, I think that the stylistic parts that work outweighed the like boring, like the camera play they would do between like paralleling the fictional storyline with the fictional real storyline.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, it kind of irked me. It overdid that at times.
I see. I disagree. I don't feel it was ever overdone, but I guess I can in retrospect see what you're saying.
It was better. It was better more often than it was poor.
All right.
Yeah, I thought it was good. I thought it was a visually really appealing movie. And I think that, like you said, I believe, Scott, I think that style was one of the strongest points of this movie to me.
Yep.
There wasn't. I guess the parts of the main plot, if you will, were kind of drab a lot of times. There were scenes of like dense fog right in the beginning of the movie. But that never bothered me. I always thought there was something kind of interesting on the screen to look at, and some of the shots in the book part of the movie were really fucking cool.
Yeah, I agree.
Just really interesting shots there. So I'm definitely give style a 1 for that.
All right. So 1's all around for style, and we're on to recommendation. Back to E.
No. I didn't hate this movie, but there's no reason to see this movie. I never plan to see this again, and I don't think I'll have I don't think you'll be at you won't lose something for not having seen this work. If you happen to catch it, fine, but yeah, I have to give it a 0 for recommendation.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I don't need to watch it again. I don't really recommend. I'm not going to recommend it to anybody. You know, I see this as fairly mediocre to slightly over mediocre movie, perhaps. And you know, like you said, if it's on and you happen to watch it, you're not going to probably straight up hate it, but it doesn't bring anything new or all that interesting, I don't think, to film or story.
No, I sort of agree. I was sort of wavering on this one, but I think you guys just convinced me that, yeah, I was excited like to see this movie, like surrounding it from what I knew of it. Now having seen it, I'd be like, yeah, you know what? I wish someone would take a mashup of just the fictionalized parts, the Texas parts, and I'd watch that again. But the rest of it, I can sort of take it or leave it, and I most likely will leave it. And yeah, I don't really have any desire or feel I need to see this movie again, so I will give it a 0 for recommendation. All right, so all the scores are in, and we'll go to E to tally it up.
So Scott and myself both give it a 7, and curmudgeonly old nincompoop Stephen Hermosi.
Nincompoop? I get to be the miser today.
You're a nocturnal nincompoop.
I gave it 5. So in all total, the grand score is 6.3.
I think that's probably about right. It's a little bit better than average. Maybe I wouldn't say mediocre, but I wouldn't say much more than that. No. So yeah, I think that'll about do it. Any other final thoughts about Nocturnal Animals, gentlemen?
Nope.
All right then. Well, that has been our review of Nocturnal Animals, and I've been Scott Thurlow, and I will be not visiting Texas anytime soon. And I've been here with Jonathan Ian Manzer.
I will not visit Texas, hell or high water.
Yes, and Stephen Hermosi.
Have a good night.
And we'll see you next time. This has been Bon Mots. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Music and editing by Chris Morgan. This has been a Lost Cinemas production. All rights reserved.